Jack, what's up?
What's going on? Mads,
What's up?
congratulations on getting married.
Sorry?
Oh, thank you. Oh, both. Yeah, yeah. Oh, mass. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah.
You got married too?
Dude, there you go. You guys are, what do you
Yep.
guys do everything together?
Huh?
Huh?
I said, what do you do? Everything together?
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of.
I was in a different situation, I think. Um,
You had to get married.
I had to get married. My wife is from the US, so she could only stay 3 months unless we got married.
Ah, I see.
Yeah. I had to move to Sweden as well, even
And
more
we did it
north.
for the lot.
That's not so bueno.
Yes.
No, no, it's not. But she's from Thailand originally, so we're thinking this is the only year where we're actually gonna stay the winter in Sweden, cause she can't like she's too dark to stay here, honestly.
Yeah. When is the sun setting there now?
It's
5?
around. No, I think it's closer to 4 actually now.
It
Really?
goes fast now. Yeah.
That's it's more early, yeah. So again, we have to embrace the cold and get as much daylight as possible because the sun hasn't been present here for like 8 days or something. It's really
Yeah.
just a big cloud cover.
Yeah.
Well, that's usually what happens though in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Yeah,
not
it's a little bit depressing, honestly.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear that. This is the time of the year where SAD, bipolar disorder, cyclothymia, everything ramps up where you got just because the slope of the line for light falls, as fast as it falls to, December 21st. So
Yeah.
it's even rough for people, in the high latitudes of the States, which is 35 to about 45. So, you guys are even higher than that. So it's
Yeah.
not a surprise.
But I guess
No.
we'll do the best we can to make ourselves create their own light, right? What you said about grounding and cold exposure and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Compensate.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the way to do it. You have to make your own internal light. The key thing is though, when you know you have a small amount of light during the day, try to spend as much time in that light while that light is out.
Mhm.
And do it grounded, that increases, the photoelectric effect, the photomolecular effect. It increases everything that you possibly could need. And then, the same thing is you want to be, probably strict on the diet. Since it's cold, that's when you start doing the things like we talked about in Prague, you know,
Mhm.
um, proteins and fats. If you try to do a vegetarian diet, at this time of the year at high latitude, it's just psychotic.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I feel that it's pretty easy because I can just be outside for the entire day if that's what I want. But in terms of my daughter, it's another thing because she's at an institution where they set the day for her. And I've been down there many times with her, and they are literally inside under blue light for the entire day. Like maybe they're outside for an hour or something. And
Yeah,
it's
it's a
so hard
problem.
for me because I can't control it. So is there anything else that I can do to like compensate for the lack of natural light that she gets?
Well, I mean, the one thing you potentially could do, see if they'll allow you to put a red light in her environment. You know,
Mhm.
maybe that is one of the ways that you could help combat it if she's going to be inside all day. So, well, okay, let me purchase a light. Can we keep this light, at least somewhere close or around her? I
Mm.
mean,
It's
I
too
think that
too
would,
centralized for that. They're not gonna allow that.
and
You
then
think?
I think then the other thing is maybe her use of the cold. I mean, you have to focus on the things that she can control. Um,
And that's
and
when you come with me.
well, I understand the conundrum. I tell people here in the States all the time and also in El Salvador that I really believe like when you put your kid in a program or an academic program or, schooling, that basically it's almost like child abuse this day
Yeah.
because you have
Oh
no
yeah.
control. They irradiate your children 24/7. They put screens around them. And literally, if you, I almost hate to say this, they become wards of the state. That you're actually not their parents anymore. The state tells you what is going to happen. And to me, that's why I told parents, I said, look, the way the world is built right now, you're much better off having one parent stay home and homeschool, the other parent out and work, and figure it out from there. But the problem is the way the world is built financially. Like, this goes to what we talked about, in Prague the last time we spoke.
Yeah.
That if you don't have, a good financial plan that's outside the fiat system, it's really hard to do this. But that's the way the system is built. It's designed to keep you poor so that you have to work 3 or 4 jobs, so that you have to rely on the state. And I mean, you guys know we just a big election in the United States to kind of change that situation, because the United States under Biden, Harris, Obama, Clinton, the rest of them, it was headed towards, much more of an EU communist fascist system. Now, people in the United States have some hope that we're going to deregulate a lot of things. Like, if you listen to what, President-elect Trump said, his top 10 plan for things to do, it actually is tied to these things that you heard about your daughter. Like, he's going to make it easier for people, to have freedom and personal sovereignty back in their life. And, the other thing I'd like to hear from you two guys, because we haven't talked about it, but this is the perfect time to talk about it. How about the move from Prague to now in Bitcoin? Remember I told you?
Yeah.
Huh?
And
Sweet.
I invested, Jack. I invested.
Good. Because, that especially with you guys, you both getting married, you having to move to Sweden, you have a new wife. It's really important for you guys as young guys to really get as much personal sovereignty as you can. Like with Mads trying to get more personal sovereignty back for his daughter, anything you guys can do to do that, that's a really, really important point. And I do, I do think that, like, I'm going to be honest with you. I think Trump's election actually may have a bigger impact on you guys in Europe than you can imagine. And and I think many of the things that were being built there around the New World Order, about the WEF, the WHO, I think many of those things will get disrupted. I also think Trump's going to go after the UN, and I think Trump's going to go after NATO. And I think if he goes after NATO, that's going to significantly affect a lot of the European powers in the EU. And I expect it to be really interesting, because I think even after Trump's 4 years are done, he's got a pretty powerful vice president that's backed by a lot of the guys in the PayPal mafia, which is Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. So that means you potentially could have another 8 years tagged on to that if they do a good job in the first 4 years. And what does that mean? If you string together 8 to 12 years of really aggressive, sovereign regulatory cutting thing, boy, that's going to be one of the nastiest things you could ever imagine for the EU, because it goes against everything that they're actively doing. And that potentially is good for you guys. I mean, it's really, really good news. So I think it'll be interesting for you to pay attention to news. And I think the way you need to pay attention to the news now is you guys need to use Twitter. I think Twitter, if they try to cut Twitter off, because Twitter's where you're getting most of the truth about what's happening in the United States. It's the one platform that's really not censored. Trump has said, and I don't know if you guys heard this, but he has said that anybody who tries to censor the truth coming out of the United States will pay, and pay dearly, because he's going to go after money that he sends to the European Union and to European governments, and he's going to tariff the shit out of people. So this is going to be a really big issue. And I also think, we know, like in your guys' backyard, not that it's close to you, but I think the war in Ukraine will be over before January 20th. I think Putin is already—
That's what you said, right?
Yeah, well, Putin's already reached out to Trump and said, look, now that we have reasonable leadership back, and Trump really, he understands the situation there. I think Zelensky's days are numbered in Ukraine. And I think I think we're expecting to see some pretty nasty things come out of Ukraine in terms of why the Democrats in the United States supported them so much with bioweapons labs and many other things that are there. And we know the world's number one fascists are in Ukraine. That's, people that are like Nazi believers and things like that. But, as you guys probably heard from some of the explosive podcasts that I did after with you for Prague, where I really started to talk more about the politics of, not only Europe, but the Danny Jones podcast is when,
Yeah, that was interesting. That was super good.
well,
I mean,
I thought you guys would dig it because, you guys are Europeans and I don't think that you really know the truth about like the transfer agreement, how the popes, the royal family,
mhm,
and and the Rothschild bankers that are part of our Fed system, but also the Bank of England, which controls many of the central banks where you guys are, how they all came up with this plan and really what the plan was there. It's kind of what I was teaching you and Mads when I was in Prague about a loyal title. Like Bitcoin's a loyal title of money, but really a loyal title in a monarchy system was the land of both Russia and United States. Why? Because they used to be colonies of the crown, and they have really been trying to get both of them back for a really, really long time. And that means they've done a lot of nefarious things. The real problem is, you guys are both Europeans. You don't realize that a lot of your history is tied to the bullshit that these people have been doing. And when you begin
yeah,
to realize who's the wizard behind the screen, then you
mhm,
say, maybe what we're doing is not for really our benefit. Maybe it's for their benefit. And maybe we need to think about that. And that's the reason why I told both of you, quite forcefully on the street in Prague, outside where we had dinner, that I wanted both of you to really go hard into Bitcoin because I do think that the trend that's happening in the world is really going to favor Bitcoin. And I think both of you saw when Bobby Kennedy and Trump came together after Bitcoin Nashville, when they said
mhm.
make, Bitcoin a strategic reserve, that should have opened both of your guys' eyes up to what I told you on the street,
Oh,
you
for
know?
sure. I mean, I've already been on that ship before we talked. There's no doubt in my mind that Bitcoin is the future, and it's just a matter of time before it works because it kind of brings. I don't remember who it was that I heard it from, but right now economics is sort of an art. But with Bitcoins, it becomes a science. It becomes
Sure.
something that is, you know, similar to like medicine was back in the days. It was also an art. Like there was the medicine man who did something, but you didn't really know until science came in and took over, and then it kind of took off. And I heard someone talk about it like that. I think it was the other guy that was in Prague. Actually, who's that? Jack, you probably remember his name.
That was the other doctor that was with us who had dinner with us.
No, 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 no. What's his name? Also, one of the big guys in Bitcoin. He explained it like that. Anyway, it's just so fascinating. I definitely believe it's true. I mean, you can see it now. What's it at now? 75?
Uh, I I didn't check this morning when I woke up because I woke up to do this with you, but when I went to bed last night, it was close to 77.
Yeah,
Yeah.
77, the all-time high, actually.
Right. That's why I said it's kind of a good day for all of us to talk because you remember the first couple of podcasts that we did, when we talked about Bitcoin, you guys were a little bit amorphous about it. But
Yeah.
I tried to tell you when I was in Prague, like my talk was about health and wealth, and you can see it coming. And now you see what's developed in the United States with Bobby Kennedy joining forces with Trump. These are two people that don't see the world eye to eye, but where they do see the world eye to eye, they said, we need to come together. And then we need to make sure that fascism and communism isn't the dominant force in United States politics. And now you see the people in America have spoken pretty loudly. This was a pretty big win. It was a bigger win than not only everybody expected, uh, because of how many electoral college votes he got. That means that most of the United States believes in Trump. The only place that doesn't are the big, commuter cities, where a lot of the technology is. And in fact, if you saw my tweet yesterday,
Yes.
Elon Musk, posted a picture of I hear light makes you sleep better, and he showed a map of the voting map of the United States, and most of it was red, and he was making a joke about it. And I said I made a big post on Twitter. I said, look, this isn't a joke. This actually is how MK Ultra and how the government program really works, that our talent is designed to be in big cities. And that's the reason why people who fall in line with the government paradigm and narrative are in the big cities. And it turns out rural America isn't like that. Most of Americans that live outside of cities don't fall in line with the narrative that, you'll be, poor and happy about it, like Clark is where you guys are. And Americans have decided that they want to go a totally different way. And, the one thing that you can say about Americans, especially if you're Europeans, you may not understand us, but just remember, I told you guys this in Prague. We're the Europeans that came over and told the king, fuck you. We're the rowdy bunch. And we make mistakes in the United States, but the beautiful thing about our government and the way we do it is we self-correct. When enough people get pushed around by bad ideas, they're like, that's it. We've had enough. And we got pushed around by a lot of bad ideas the last 4 years. I mean, there was a lot of things, the things that happened in the post-COVID world, the lying in science, the lying in money, the DEI stuff, all the diversity stuff. One of the big things that's going on right now, a couple of days after the election, and you guys will probably love to hear this. Remember when we were in Prague, we were talking about all the farmers in your guys' home country and in Europe throwing manure at the buildings, because of agriculture, because they were going after your food. Well, that looks like it's going to be one of the biggest things, because it turns out in one of the swing states, which is Pennsylvania, you may not know this, but this is where we have a lot of Amish people. Amish people don't use any electricity, and they tend to be farmers, and they make furniture, from the wood. These people are European, and they're from, deep places in Germany and Bavaria, and they have been in the United States for 250 years. Do you know that one of the key features of this election was that the Biden administration went after raw milk? And this is the group of people that make raw milk in the United States. They started to put these guys in jail. So what did the guys that worked with Trump did? They got 150,000 Amish farmers in Pennsylvania to register to vote for the first time. Do you know how much he won Pennsylvania by? 150,000 votes. So guess what? Raw milk turned out to be a really big issue. And, I think Kamala and Biden never actually thought about this. And I thought that you guys would dig it, because, it made me think about some of the things that we all talked about on the street in Prague, that I think when you come after people's way of life, their food, their money, that's when people really begin to get pissed off,
Yeah.
At least it's true in the United States. And I think now you've seen evidence of what I've told, this summer in Prague, that it actually physically happened. And do I feel good about it? Yeah, I do, because I think when people try to mess with our personal sovereignty, that's when we need to get mad,
Yeah.
And that's when I told you, both of you, that I want you to be savages. I've been watching what you guys have been doing, on your social media stuff since we talked, and I love it. I actually love the fact that both of you are married now, and I think the main thing is I want you to continue to be savages where you are, and continue the message. Try to wake up as many of the sleeping Europeans, because guess what? I look at you guys as brothers from another mother, and we're not that far removed, from, living together, maybe 25 generations ago. We also are Europeans that are cultivating a new land in the United States. Now, what we need to do is we need to realize that if we support, freedom for each other, and we have governments that do that, then that's governments for the people. And that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be the other way around, where the governments are dictating to us. That's why when Mads said what he did about his daughter, that kind of shit bothers me. Like, we have to change that, in government. We have to change centralized institutions that's a good idea, that the way we do it is better than the way parents want it done. That to me is not a good situation.
But that's gonna happen now, right?
Well,
That's about to happen now in the US. Mass, wasn't it you who told me that now there's something you can put up as a public person and you can then be voted in, whoever you are, depending on how many votes you get? To me, that sounds like fucking not Bitcoin, but that sounds like a blockchain system, a decentralized system.
well,
And
to be
just the
honest
fact
with you,
that
we had a talk. We had a
Mhm.
talk yesterday with one of the guys, and I'm going to be doing some work here with El Salvador. One of the things that they want to do is they want to add zero knowledge proofs or knock chains to the voting systems in the United States. You do that,
perfect.
you make actually voting even more secure because it takes away a lot of the bullshit. Like one of the bad things about the United States voting system is that it doesn't require any voter ID in a lot of the blue states. We need to change that. We need to remove technology as an oracle problem between us and them. And
Mhm.
I was making jokes that several of the states still haven't called elections, so we don't know how many people are in Congress, how many people are in the Senate yet, because they're still counting. But we have shows over here where people get up and sing to win a contest, and they get 50 million votes in a commercial break, and they have no problem counting them. I'm like,
Mhm.
why do we have to wait 4 or 5 days, to do this? It just
Mhm.
tells you that the system is ripe and built for corruption so that one side
Yeah.
can steal the other. And that needs to be fixed for both sides. Why? Because the people demand it, not because either party demands it. It's because the
Yeah.
people look, when we vote, we want an accurate tally of what we really want. And I believe that
Mm.
also for the party, and the ideology I don't support. I find it ironic that they're always the one that doesn't want those things. Why? Because they're the ones that cheat. And here's the crazy thing.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've gotten this yet in Europe, but if you look at how many people voted in the last 4 or 5 elections, one thing you'll notice, the last election in 2020, there were 17 million other people who voted that didn't vote this time. Trump got almost the same amount of votes. So what does that tell us? You know, tells us that they use COVID to do mail-in votes without any ID to steal the election. So
Yeah.
you guys in Europe, when you hear all the story about January 6th and people were running through the Capitol with Trump flags and trying to take over the government, turns out
It's
that
bullshit.
that was a government operation that was done to protect that they certified a false election. That's really what it was. It was the government
I mean, I definitely
knowing that they
believe
did
it.
illegal shit. So,
But I
so
mean,
a lot of those people in jail right now. And I'm hoping when Trump comes in on January 20th, the first thing he does, besides free Ross Ulbricht with the Bitcoin guy, that he frees all these people from January 6th. They've been persecuted by their own government because they faked an election. To me, it's crazy.
mhm. Oh yeah,
But
for sure.
I'm just like, I used to think that America was some crazy people, really, especially under the Biden administration and Obama and everything before. But now all of a sudden, just like that, it seems like paradise over there. And compared to Europe, like we're Nazis now. I don't know if you saw the voting statistics with the European countries. Like we live in Denmark. If we could vote, 96% of us would vote for Harris. Like we are so brainwashed over here.
Yeah.
Like, do you think that the election over in the US could have any positive affection on us over here?
I think it's going to have a huge effect. And I think the reason why you don't realize that American policy affects Europe really
Yeah,
big. In fact, I'm going to tell you a couple of things that I see
yeah.
that make huge effects. Let me tell you, we'll start with the most obvious one. I think the number one thing that's going to change in Europe almost immediately is your energy policy. I think that Trump may actually help Russia and Germany rebuild the pipelines that Biden blew up. Once you do,
Nice.
Mhm.
once you do that,
Which he did.
right? Well, we know that they did now. The next big thing I think is reestablishing energy policy that makes sense, like the net zero, all that carbon bullshit from the World Economic Forum, and
Mhm.
that's all got to go. That actually deregulates and makes Europeans' life better. Then I think the next thing that has to go is NATO. When NATO goes, what does that mean? That means that many of the monies that the United States has to spend, to militarize Europe for the benefit of themselves, meaning the American colony. The stuff that we're spending money on over there makes no sense now. We're 80 years past World War II. This is still world thinking over there. And I understand that they think it's a good idea, but I think Germany, the amount of troops that we have there needs to come out. I think it's almost like deregulating Europe by having Trump in there. And how is Trump going to affect this? I can tell you the number one thing, and you guys will be surprised to hear this. Trump is actually floating a pretty big idea that initially a lot of people were stunned that he was saying 2 weeks before he got elected, that he's going to get rid of income tax completely in the United States, and then he's going to use tariffs. Why is this going to affect Europe? Do you know what tariffs are going to do to different businesses? And he's going to weaponize the tariffs. Like, if you don't play ball with his administration, he's going to make life really difficult for people in Europe and Asia. And my belief is that these things that he's doing is going to make life really good for you, because it's going to make the regulators in Europe realize they got to loosen everything and all the things that they've believed. Like, Mads, you used the word, and it was a great word. The fascists that are present in the EU, when they realize they get choked, like, I look at the only place probably in Europe that really gets this message loud and clear is probably, people in Prague and Czech Republic, but also the people in Hungary. The people in Hungary have already told the EU, you can kiss our ass. Then the other big effect that we haven't talked about, but I think this is the biggest effect, is when you see what Trump's going to do with our southern border. He's going to close it, and then he's going to deport all the people they left in. Well, one of the big problems in Europe right now is you've let a lot of people that shouldn't be in your countries. I think you're also going to see nuclear come back. I don't think they're going to, I think it'll make a huge impact over the next 20 years. And I think they're going to have to do it. And then here's the big one, Bitcoin. If he makes Bitcoin a global reserve asset, do you know what that means for people in Europe?
No.
That means that you guys are huge at risk, because if we back our money, our currency by Bitcoin, that means that our currency compared to your currency is going to be different. So believe it or not, this is going to start a cold war in finance, that people are going to have to mine Bitcoin to stay up. And what is the goal? Why is this a good thing? We didn't get into this the last time we met in Prague, but I'm going to tell you that Bitcoin is going to be used as a tool to evict the central banks from everywhere in the world. And it's going to be very, very interesting if your country doesn't get on board. Who's the one of the countries that I think is going to get on board? I think the BRICS, but in Europe, I think Norway will probably be the one that gets in sooner, because they're going to realize we need to do something. The country that I think can make the biggest turnaround is probably France. Why? Because they already have a lot of nuclear power plants, so they can be energy independent quickly. I think the country that's really in shambles right now is Germany. Why? Because they're a huge industrial base, but they're having their energy starve for them for all this bullshit from net zero. I think that policy is going to rapidly reverse. I think that Putin is going to be a big part of that, because he's going to start selling back into that market. The idea that a Trump is going to bring, he actually said this, energy is going to be made plentiful everywhere in the United States. That means the United States will actually help people out in Europe who decide that they want to burn, hydrocarbons. And when you add energy back to any economy, it stimulates huge growth. And that is the key. Like, right now, it's stagnant. Like, the things that we talked about in Europe, like people's pensions being at risk. Remember when we talked about, the Bank of England, when the pensions almost went boom like 2 years ago, and it could have led to massive problems? Look, you start having to buy Bitcoin and you back the pensions by that. That means that people's, retirement accounts are not going to go by the wayside. But if you stay on a fiat system and you're European, that means that your parents' pensions, the money they have, that all could go by the wayside. I mean, Kamala Harris was talking about charging unrealized capital gains. That means that, your family's houses that have been in in Europe for like, I don't know, 50 generations. They may have had to sell that if that thing came true, in the United States and then went to Europe. Those talks in the United States, they're over. Like corporate tax rates here going down. They're not going up. Like when I tell you that we were the Titanic sinking under Biden and Kamala, I'm telling you right now, it's the engine has stopped. We're bailing out the water. We're patching the holes. And bro, we are going a completely new way. We have turned the ship around and we're going 180 degrees the opposite way. And remember what I told you the last couple times, that life, money is like, it's like a photograph. It develops from the negatives. It took the United States to get as close as they ever were to fascism and communism to realize that this isn't where we want to go. That realization has to happen in your country. It has to happen in the EU. And do I believe that it's already happened? I saw it when I was with you guys in Prague. People in Prague were not excited about the way the EU is going. I talked to all the guys in Prague. You could see that there was a lot of people in Europe that didn't support, what the politicians were doing. We saw that in European elections. You saw Macron actually lost the election, but still kept power. That kind of shit only happens in Europe. That doesn't happen here. And I think you're going to see a huge effect. I think the country that is in the biggest hole right now is the UK. Why? Because they just elected a guy who's an absolute communist, and they're going to be stuck with him. But here's the funny part. They're going to be stuck with him in a world where Trump is going to be doing exactly the opposite. You are going to see the United States and the UK policy. They're going to go way apart. They're not going to be going to be the furthest that we've been away from the UK probably since the Revolutionary War. There is nothing that the King or Starmer is going to do that's going to make Trump happy at all. Like I can tell you, Trump can't stand the royal family. He cannot stand the Bank of England. So I can tell you that'll be the frostiest relationship you could ever imagine. I think the second frostiest will probably be with Germany, but Trump will tell him, we'll help you, but the partners that you shun, specifically the guys in Russia, Russia has the most to gain in Europe. Why? Because Trump gets the global plan. Other things that I think are going to happen, I think China is going to be very happy with Trump. I also think North Korea is going to be very happy with Trump. You remember the last time that Trump was in, North Korea actually had their best relationship with the American government in the history of their country. Why? Because he said, look, if you want to be who you are and that's great. Just don't fucking piss off anybody by shooting rockets and this, that. You do that, we're fine with it. Like, you do what you have to do. It's going to do the thing with China. It's going to be all about, bringing manufacturing back to the United States. Other country that's going to lose, Mexico. Why? We made a treaty called NAFTA. NAFTA basically is how we took all of our manufacturing jobs, from the top part of the United States, the states that the Democrats just lost, like Harris lost. They call it the Blue Wall. That's, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. All those jobs went to Mexico from Clinton onward. So for the last 35 years, that's where they are. Well, who did Mexico just elect? They elected a communist Jewish person in Mexico. Guess what? She's in trouble now because now she's got a guy in her attic that says, we're not playing ball the way they used to play ball. This is really bad news. And she made already a political mistake. She was the only leader in the world that didn't call Trump after the election to congratulate him. Because you know what she said? Well, we have to see when all the votes are counted. Because she knew that they were going to try to steal it. Because guess what? The people that just got voted out, those are the people that stole all the jobs from the Blue Wall. That's why the Blue Wall is no longer blue. It's red. These are the trends that I think are a big deal for you guys. And I think
For sure.
I think the number one thing that I want to see in Europe, because I think the easiest way for you to start is actually my belief when we talk over the next 3 or 4 years, you're going to see major European powers start to mine Bitcoin. Then you guys are going to go, holy shit. Because remember, the acronym that we have in Bitcoin, we say, you fix money, you fix the world, because money underpins all the big problems that we have, not only in politics, but also in basic life. And if you make something decentralized and thermally more efficient, then that means that economic growth can spring from that. That means that everyday European life improves. It also means that you'll be able to move across borders. It means that it won't try to make you economic slaves. And do I think that that trend will be led now? Because now you have the one of the biggest powerful economies in the world saying we're going to make Bitcoin the back in our money. Dude, that is humongous for your.
It's a huge step.
How bullish that is.
Can you try to elaborate on what you mean by how they're going to use the Bitcoin? Because they're not going to make it the primary currency, as I can understand. So what?
No, it's not going to be the currency. They're going to keep the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency. But what Bobby Kennedy and Trump said, if you remember at Bitcoin National, because you guys talked to me about it a little bit, but we didn't get into it. Bobby Kennedy's plan was more aggressive than Trump's, but Trump basically said, we're going to buy between 450 and 550 Bitcoin every day. And we're going to put it on the national treasury. And that money is going to be used to back our currency. So what does that mean? It means to the European that is America potentially going to pay their debt off by using Bitcoin to do it? So what can we do now? So I don't know how much you guys follow what Michael Saylor's doing. You remember I had dinner with him when I was in Prague. And one of the things that he told us in that dinner is that he was going to do something called the sale or put, where basically he was going to take money that he got free from how powerful his stock was, take that money out and then buy Bitcoin with it. And he was going to do that perpetually until people realized what the hell he was doing. And he's done that. You guys have seen since we were in Prague, it's pretty blatantly obvious. Here's the crazy thing. Trump now has the same idea to do use for the United States. So do you know what that means for the Bitcoin market? It means that potentially there's no more bear market ever. Why? Because you're going to have a major global power coming in. And he said for 5 straight years, every day, the United States will buy 500 Bitcoin and put it
a lot of Bitcoin
treasury. Got it?
Yeah.
So think about that. And also at the same time, he's given the reins to Elon Musk. And this is why I would tell all Europeans who listen to your podcast, I really want you guys to follow Twitter and follow Musk. Get most of your news from the United States from Twitter, because what did Elon really do? Even though he's part of the problem, you know, as an industrial military player, he did make Twitter free, censorship free, so that people could see the truth. Trump was so impressed by what he did. He said, okay, when you bought Twitter for $44 billion, you went in there and you basically fired 85% of people, and Twitter didn't miss a beat. He goes, I need you to do the same thing in American government. So right now, Elon Musk has borrowed Malay's chainsaw, and he's going to go in cutting $2 trillion of spending literally on January 20th. If you guys go on Twitter right now, you will see the things that Musk is saying. This is gone. Bobby Kennedy came out yesterday and said, the best line ever I've heard from a politician. He said to the people in the FDA, he said, preserve your records, but prepare to be evicted. Okay? Because guess what? Departments are getting ready to go bye-bye. Like the Department of Education, I don't expect to be there. And here's the crazy thing. You guys will love this because you know that you guys have a lot of people on the government payroll. Trump has said, hey, we're still going to pay you. We're just going to close the place where you work so you can make your money, stay for free, and stay home. We don't want you in the government. They're going to destroy the bureaucracy these people are in. They're like, okay, we'll pay you, but we're closing down what you do. It's a plan. And why can you do something like that? It seems so crazy to pay people not to work. But guess what? You can do that when you're putting Bitcoin on your national treasury. You got it? That's how Bitcoin works here. So guess what? All the crazy thing, like when you see Trump do this, because I know people in Europe are going to be in disbelief that he's going to basically put bureaucrats out of business by still paying them and paying all their healthcare and everything else, but they won't have a job. They won't have a say in this government. So all they can cry about, well, yeah, he's still paying me, but I can't do anything. Why? Because they're the people that ruin the government. So you get rid of them. The intelligence agency, holy shit. You should heard what they said about that. So the CIA and FBI are going to be audited. Do you know what that means for Europe? Bro, everything changes. Like I can't
Yeah.
even tell you how good I think this change in leadership is going to be for you guys in Europe. Now it's
I
going to
have a
take
question, Jack.
go ahead.
So I heard the Danny Jones podcast, and you ended that podcast by saying, "I'm a free agent," right?
It's true. Yep.
And in my opinion, I mean, I know you talked to Bobby Kennedy, right? You talked to him, and you know him, and he's going to be a
Yep.
part of the government. How much? And you have done some government work in El Salvador. You've rewritten the constitution, and you helped them understand the decentralized way of medicine. What about or health? Are you going to have any sort of role with the government now? Did they reach
Uh,
out?
if they reached out, I would consider it, but to be honest with you, I'm not really that interested in it. And part of the reason is you guys know prior to probably a year ago, you never heard me ever talk about politics. Why?
Mhm.
I'm truly a doctor. I'm interested in science. That's how it goes. But when you understand that science has been stolen by the people in the government, we use COVID as a perfect example. That's when you get to push to the point and say, okay, we need to fix the government so this never happens again, so they can't ruin science. My real goal right now is actually to fix the big problems in science. What are those problems? What's really my focus? I want to decentralize the way scientific research is done. So that means I want to retool peer review. How is peer review stolen and controlled science? Believe it or not,
Mm.
that's Maxwell and Ghislaine Maxwell. Their family is what controls peer review everywhere in the world. Most people don't know.
Really?
Most people don't know that they own all of the journals everywhere. So they control this whole thing. So they get to say what's true and what's not. So this was one of the other ways that the tentacles of the octopus were tied into this story. And when you
Epstein and
realize,
everything?
correct. So when you realize that Maxwell, both her dad, who's dead now, but her were, dual passport people between the UK and Israel, and you understand that the Mossad, the intelligence agency, was working with the CIA and FBI, you can actually see they're almost the same people. Like, for example, some of the things that are going on in Israel right now, what I'm about to say probably will stun some European members, but who is Hamas? Do you know who Hamas is? Hamas is the intelligence agencies setting up a psyop so that Israel can go and ethnic cleanse the whole country. That's what this
Yeah.
is. This mimics exactly what happened in 1947, 48, before Israel was a country. They were not happy with what the king and the Rothschilds decided with the Balfour Declaration when it was written on November 2nd, 1917, that the Jews were going to be given a homeland in Palestine. They have decided that they don't want any Christians and they don't want any Muslims there. They just want it to be all Jewish. But if you really know the history of the Balfour Declaration, that's not what they had in mind back then, that everybody would live in peace and harmony on that little sliver of desert land, next to the Mediterranean. But it turns out that the people who are the Zionists that formed Israel, and many of those people, unfortunately, I hate to tell you, are in American government and in American business. They're not like the people who are Jewish. And this is something that I think Europeans have done a really shitty job at. They mix them all together. The people that formed Israel and who are like Netanyahu today, those people are the militants. They are the problems. But the people who are the Jewish people that, just go and wear their yarmulke and go to church and do the things they do,
Yeah, they're just
they're not
normal
right.
citizens, yeah.
They're not the same people. And there's
No.
many Jews that are really upset with the Zionists. In fact, if you look at what's going on in Israel right now, because I don't think many Europeans, and I know a lot of Americans don't get this viewpoint, is that they almost had a civil war in Israel between the Jews and the Zionists. And the Zionists are trying to use an iron fist to control their policy. Remember, the Mossad supports the Zionists, not the Jewish people.
Mhm.
And the
Yeah,
Mossad, and CIA, and the FBI, these are just synonyms. The intelligence agencies are the same. I'd even tell you that MI6 from the UK is also a synonym there, but I would say the MI6 is a little bit different than all of them because they have a Britnocentric viewpoint of the world, and they don't work in unison all the time with the Mossad or with the FBI or the CIA. But the Mossad, CIA, and FBI, bro, they're on the same team. You know, it's like
yeah.
you got a goalie, a striker, and a defenseman. That they're on the same team, and you need to understand that. And I don't think
What
that.
the hell is their goal?
Well, the goal of the Zionists is simple. They want to eradicate and ethnic cleanse the entire country so that only Jews control it. And here's the problem: it's a great idea if you can support your own military, but the military in Israel needs the United States help to keep all the Arab borders close. And if you remember in the Danny Jones podcast, you heard Danny want to go down this route with me, that I said, of course, Israel was involved in JFK's assassination. This is how they got the bomb in Pennsylvania from Newmack. That's the Apollo affair. You saw he didn't want to talk about that. But the problem in the United States is nobody understands why Israel has a huge power and control. It's because the Mossad, CIA, and FBI are like this, and it started right after World War II. And when you understand that the Jewish people, the reason why they have sway over a lot of people in American government, because in this program where we built the atomic bomb called the Manhattan Project, we used something called Operation Paperclip, where we took most of the Jewish scientists from Europe, brought them to the United States, put them in the desert. We built the bomb in 3 years. It was truly an amazing time in American history to do this because it was the biggest, industrial project that we've ever undertaken on our own borders. And when it was successful, what was the answer then in 1945? Well, all the people who were the Zionists in the world said, okay, you used our people. Now we want to make our own country in Israel. That's where Israel comes from. So it turns out the Israel military complex forms an alliance right there with those Zionists. And the United States has always felt guilty because we used their people to build this bomb. That's where that alliance comes from. That alliance right now, however, is very strained. That if there's one good thing I can tell you about the Biden-Harris administration, they put the most strain on the American-Israel relationship. Why? Because they wanted to break it. Okay? The problem is the people that are behind Trump, like, for example, this guy, Lutnick, and the guy that runs BlackRock, Larry Fink, they both have Israeli passports. I'm very concerned about those guys being involved, in our system. But here's the thing. The way that I've rationalized it may be wrong, but this is how I think about it. I think to get America back on track, we need to fix our money system. So if we have to use these guys for that period of time, but eventually what we need to do as American populace is we need to get rid of AIPAC. AIPAC is basically the lobby for Israel that's in the United States. Currently in our government, only one congressman doesn't have an AIPAC rep, and that's Thomas Massey in Kentucky. You guys would like He's kind of like your brother from another mother. Why? Because he lives in Kentucky. He's a big farmer. He believes in regenerative farming. Lots of talk in the States right now that he may be off the agricultural, department chair. But he's one of the good guys in government, one of the very few people in our government that truly work for the people. So I think the long-term goal, the next 50 years, we need to eliminate AIPAC. You guys may not know this history, but I did mention it in the Danny Jones podcast, that JFK was the only president that came out and wanted to make AIPAC register as a foreign agent. This was not good news for David Ben-Gurion, who was the prime minister of Israel at the time. And that's really, I think, one of the main reasons that they formed an alliance to take JFK out. Plus, the other big issue is they wanted the plutonium to build a bomb so they could keep the Arabs, at bay for their big plan. Their big plan was, ethnic cleansing, of the entire peninsula so they could have it for themselves. That policy in Israel hasn't changed since 1948, but that policy is under attack in Israel. There's good people in Israel that don't want to do this because they understand that their life is miserable because of what they're doing to the people who naturally lived in Palestine. I mean, people don't realize, and I don't know if you guys understand, that when the Balfour Declaration was written by the Rothschilds and the King George, that 97% of the people that live in Palestine were Christian or Muslim. Only 3% were
Yeah.
Jewish. And you know what the Balfour Declaration was all about?
Mhm.
Transfer agreement that propped Hitler up. Hitler was designed to take the Jews from Germany, take their property, but route them to Palestine. Because what did the Zionist, who at that time was Rockefeller and the Rothschilds, the two families that are involved in most of the central banks in the world, they wanted people to be resettled in Palestine to build the Jewish state. That was really the goal, and Hitler agreed to this. And that's the reason why there's been such a miscommunication in the history books
Mhm.
that everybody thinks that, you know, Hitler was the worst guy in the world. Turns out the people that are the worst people in the world are the royal family, the Rothschilds, and the Rockefellers who set
Yeah.
this crazy shit up. And
Yeah.
because that crazy shit blew up, that's how we got the Second World War. And, you know, the Treaty of Versailles was built after World War I when this Balfour Declaration was done. It almost guaranteed that we were going to get into another conflict. And why did they want another conflict? It's pretty simple. They wanted another shot to try to get the United States and Russia back for a lloydial title, and that blew up in their face again. In fact, I will tell you, there is a guy in the United States who you guys should follow. He's on Twitter. I think his handle's called Martyr Made. I think his name is Dylan Cooper. That's his real name. He has a podcast too, but you guys should follow him because the word on the street in the United States is he is going to start to deconstruct World War II history the real way, not the way that's in the history books. And
Mm.
I'm going to tell you that Winston Churchill was probably a bigger criminal than Adolf Hitler was. And I happen to be in belief of that as well. Why? Because he was an agent of King George. He was an agent of the Rothschild bankers. And
Yeah.
when these things went sideways, like the reason Nicholas and his family was murdered in Siberia was because Trotsky found out what some of the things that the Rothschilds and the king were doing. And he unilaterally, outside of Lenin and Stalin, decided to kill the royal family. And that stunned the people in the UK. That stunned the Rothschilds, it stunned the royal family. That stimulated the royal family to change their name from Saxe Coburg Gotha to Windsor. And there was a real risk to the royal family at that time. But ultimately, the world events that I don't think Europeans know, that's probably the most important part of your guys' lives. In World War II, there was 3 big meetings. You probably remember the meetings from what you learned, but you didn't know what went down at those meetings. In 1943, they had a meeting at Tehran, Iran. It was Stalin, FDR, and Churchill. And it turns out at that meeting, this is when Stalin and FDR talked, and FDR and Stalin said that they would rebuild Europe. They'd rebuild Russia because of what Russia was doing in Germany to get rid of the Nazis. But this was the first time that Stalin sent the message to FDR that be careful with Churchill, be careful with the Rothschild bankers that are funding both sides of this war, because these are the guys that I had to go in 1940 before the war started. And he told FDR, I killed Trotsky. And I did it because he was a real problem. He created a massive issue. And that's when FDR started to get the message that Russia knew that the UK was trying to lure both Russia and the United States into World War II so that they could try to get
Mhm.
their control back over them. And FDR was stunned at this. So then they meet the next year at the next big event, which is the Yalta Conference, and Stalin doubles down. He tells him that there's big things going. This is when things get really crazy in the United States, because now General Groves is literally maybe 9 to 11 months away from making the bomb. FDR comes back from Yalta, and tells all the generals that, what's going on. And that's when General Groves makes the decision that he's got to replace the vice president for FDR in the next term because he's getting ready to come in for his fourth term. He's got the polio. Things are bad. He's probably going to die. And General Groves decides we need to have a Manchurian candidate in case he dies because we can't have the guy that's the vice president for 3 terms. Why? That guy, you guys would love him. He's a farmer. He's like Massey.
Mm-hmm.
And his name is Henry Wallace. And the leader of the Senate at the time is a guy named Jimmy Burns from South Carolina. He actually cooked the books at the DNC in Chicago in 44. And he actually in one day switched Henry Wallace out and put Harry Truman in. Harry Truman was the Manchurian candidate that General Groves could control. And General Groves made sure that this would drop 2 bombs at the end of the war. Well, this pissed the other generals off in the United States, meaning Patton, MacArthur, and Eisenhower. Why? Because all of them knew that they didn't need the bomb to win the war. But General Groves was hell-bent on showing the world with his Jewish scientists that we built something amazing and we're going to show the rest of the world how powerful we are. That single event ruined world history till right now, till 24. If you think about everything that's happened since that event, then you'll understand really where the Cold War comes from. Why? General Groves made a decision. We're going to make a new enemy. Hitler's going to be done. I'm going to make Russia. Stalin became the real enemy. And then you hear even how did this go in the 2016, 2020 election in the United States? Who did they blame for Russian disinformation? Putin. You see, they're blaming the same country. This is the industrial military complex that Groves built. It stayed very, very strong in our government. And that is the one that's linked with the people in Israel. And the people in Israel are working in unison. Whatever the industrial military complex wants to do in the United States, Israel says, hold my beer, we'll help you. That's why these people are linked, and you need to understand that. But I can tell you, I believe, even though Trump has very strong ties to Israel, I believe that the things that are going to break those ties are going to continue in the United States over the next 50 or 60 years. And I believe that a lot of the issues going on in Israel, I think they may face their own civil war in the next 40, 50 years. That's going to have major implications, for what happens, in the Sinai Peninsula. It's going to have major implications for Saudi Arabia. It's going to have major implications for the Suez Canal. It's going to have major implications for, the countries to the west, Iran and Iraq and everything else. Because I think right now, the biggest problem, at least from a military issue for Israel, is Iran. Iran is the real problem. And I will tell you that Iran was starting to piss off even Biden when Biden was the president. Trump is going to have to deal with that, but I think Trump will have zero problems dealing with the Iranians. Why? Because he can do a lot of different things to heal and make them understand there's a new sheriff in town, and this sheriff doesn't have he doesn't just talk shit, he does stuff. That's going to be the big change there. And I think what I believe is going to happen, which is good for you guys, is that there's going to be less war in the world because Trump does not want war. What Trump loves money. Trump loves Bitcoin. Trump loves cash. So he wants to make all the economies better. And he knows that war takes away from economic growth. And this is great news for you guys, because then you won't have a war above you in the Middle East, and you won't have a war above you in Ukraine with Russia. And if those 2 things end, I think for continental Europeans, I think that you're going to wind up liking Trump more than you currently do now. I know
think
that.
so too.
I think most of the people in Europe right now are worried about Trump, and I'm like, you shouldn't be worried about Trump. The guys that you should be worried about are running Germany and the royal family and the prime minister and at 10 Downing Street. That guy is a fucking problem.
But let's talk about how Trump will end corruption in the United States, because everything has been built on corruption, both in the industrial military complex and the governments, and even down to Hollywood, like you can see with P. Diddy right now.
Well,
what are your thoughts on that part?
Well, you have to realize that the people that stole the election from Trump the last time, that's the industrial military complex. He is going to take them apart. This is the reason why I'm telling you, even though he still supports Israel, he knows that the people that are working to support Israel are the people that also try to keep him out of government. So they are going to pay a very steep price for doing this. And if he happens to find out, which is what I think he's going to find out, that Israel was involved with him losing the last election, that's when you're going to see the United States and Israel go like this. And I believe that will happen probably at the end of his next term, but into maybe the term that J.D. Vance will have. The interesting thing is J.D. Vance is a very interesting character. Why? Because his whole career has been propped up by the PayPal mafia guys. That's, like Peter Thiel and Elon
Musk. Yeah.
Right. And when you realize that Peter Thiel is also part of this Mossad, he's part of the industrial military complex. He does a lot of things that are really not good for the United States, but he's also a big Bitcoiner. So what we're going to have to see, what matters more to these people that hold dual passports and dual feelings for both the United States and Israel, it's going to come to a point, Mads, where they're going to have to make a choice. Do you like the money more or do you like the war more? And what I think happens, and I've told you guys this, that Bitcoin makes war really difficult to fund. That means that Israel is going to have to start mining Bitcoin too, because they're going to have to start paying for their own defense. I also think that's what's going to happen in Europe, because I think the United States is going to spend less in defense than they currently do. That is going to be the impetus that gets all of you to start changing your thoughts about money. Why? Because you're going to start to see Americans start to turn the money printer on, not to spend on war. It's going to be to make Bitcoin. And that's the reason why I'm betting on the Bitcoin side and not the corruption side, because when you have money that's as hard as it can be and you can't fuck with, it makes corruption much more difficult to deal with. So money supports corruption. It supports war. And this is a concept that I didn't lay out with you guys as much in Prague, but this is the game theory that's behind Bitcoin. And I see what's happening in the United States is the first big step where our link to the industrial military complex, corruption, and war begins to go apart. It's the first time since World War II that I can honestly say in the United States that we're moving in a totally different direction. And I believe you'll see that in foreign policy in the next 12 years. That's something that you guys will have to pay attention to. And the more the United States doubles down on Bitcoin, the faster this decoupling will take. Do I think Trump is absolutely going to go after corruption in the bureaucracy? He's got to, Mads. Why? That's why he got elected. And that's the reason why Bobby Kennedy joined him. Bobby Kennedy is going to be in charge of, the science, the food, things like that. But he's not going to be in control of the money, and he's not going to be in control of the energy. That's going to be Trump's game. So Trump is going to have to deal with the corruption. And I think the best way to do it is to use Bitcoin as a strategic asset. My one problem with this whole thing, and I've said it yesterday on X, probably put a tweet out, I don't know, it's like 15 tweets long that tell you my concern already with Trump's selection. He picked a guy named Howard Lutnick. He's the guy that's the primary broker dealer in the U.S. Treasury market right now for Cantor Fitzgerald. So what does that mean for Europeans that don't understand how our markets really work? He basically is a liaison that buys and sells our debt on global markets. He's one of the biggest players. He's been hand selected by Trump to be the primary broker dealer for our Bitcoin policy to become the national reserve that's going to back US dollars. Now, who's one of his friends? The guy that runs BlackRock. BlackRock is a company that owns most of the corrupt corporations that are in the United States. If you look at them, it's a who's who of all the most powerful companies. So these two guys are in cahoots. Here's where the real problem is. This is great news for Mads and our friend in Sweden, but not great news for guys like Uncle Jack. Why? Because these two guys are going to act to suppress the price of Bitcoin, even when we're buying 500 coins a day. Why? Because the United States has to get 1 million coins like this. So what does that mean? The price is definitely going to go up because, it's a supply and demand curve. But is it going to go up as explosively as it would have if Kamala got in? No, Kamala would have blown money up, and that would have been better for Bitcoiners. Like, this is why I was working against my directive when I talked to you guys. I said, look, the truth be told, Kamala Harris was probably better for Uncle Jack's bank account than Trump was.
What? Okay.
Because you get to hyper Bitcoinization faster with communists. Why? Because the money gets destroyed. Everything gets centralized. So decentralized money would go through the roof because we get hyperinflation in the United States. But that also leads to Mad Max. In the world of Mad Max, it would make things crazy, not only in the United States, but that's the reason Uncle Jack was in El Salvador. I had front row seat to see the shit show going on in the United States. Now that the pressure is off on that because Trump's in, but why is this good news for you two guys? That means that you're going to be able to get in Bitcoin. And I think what I've told you in Prague, I'm telling all of your friends again, if you're not buying Bitcoin now, you're making the biggest fucking mistake of your life. Because guess what? All the changes that are going to go, you guys are both young. The next 50 years of your life, the United States is going to be the Atlas holding up the world on the finance side. And it turns out the more we get addicted to Bitcoin, the more we evict central bankers from their pigeonholes, the more the industrial military complex becomes withered down so they become betas, so they can't go and fight. That's ultimately what you guys should see when you guys are in your 80s. That should be the trend. And it doesn't matter what the politicians in Europe do, because it matters what the United States does, because we have the global reserve currency. The United States does that. That is going to be the modus. Remember how I've said to you many, many times that politicians don't change Bitcoin. Bitcoin changes politicians. That is the process that I'm trying to tell both of you. And I know it's counterintuitive to how you think about it, but that is the trend now that the United States is on. Okay. It's clear as day. We have 280 congressmen in the United States that now support Bitcoin. That's over half. So what does that mean? That means all the changes that Trump, Lutnick, and Fink are going to bring in, they're going to get approved. Like, if he has Congress for the first 2 years, bro, you're going to see massive changes. That's why I'm telling all of you, you have to go all in. Like, I would tell you, if your new wives have gold in their teeth, go to the dentist, take the gold out, sell it, and buy Bitcoin.
Okay, but we are still addicted to fiat money, at least here in Denmark.
Yeah,
so
you are. You are, but
realistically,
that doesn't mean you need to be addicted to it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but what ratio should I have between my fiat money and Bitcoin?
I told you this in Prague. I'll tell you again. All your money should be in Bitcoin, except the money you need to pay your bills. So, for example, if you have to pay your food that way, you have to pay your rent, then you're going to need some fiat, but you have to figure out on your finances what that is. But for you to be a European Bitcoin savage, all the money that you're saving for, when you become an old man, they needs to be in Bitcoin. And I promise you, the United States government is going to make Mads fucking richer than fuck. I promise you. And then what you're going to realize, if you remember what I said to you guys in Prague, I'm going to jar some memories. I said, maybe one of you guys start to get into politics, because guess what? You're going to begin to realize, wow, we really can change big things as one person, because this happened in my life. Here I am sitting there. Like, for you guys, for you thinking about it, Bitcoin is like you guys having an extra job that you don't have to go to, but you get paid. And when you see that, what if we did this to the whole country? Then you're going to realize there's going to be more savages in Denmark that wake up and say, this is a good idea. Then eventually you're probably going to have the monarchy in there go, after seeing this for 20 years and seeing what the United States is doing, like, why aren't we doing this? Like, your neighbors are going to put pressure on you. Like, it's kind of like We have a saying in the United States, keeping up with the Joneses. Like when somebody buys a nice house and a Mercedes across the street, everybody wants to go. If somebody puts up a couple of Christmas ornaments, then everybody wants to do it.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. But I'm not worried, and I don't want either one of you to be worried about what your governments do. I want you to be worried about what the savages that come to your businesses do. You teach them. You explain to them. You show them this video so they understand that Bitcoin will change them. I mean, look at the short time that we've been talking together. Like our first podcast, if I'm not mistaken, Bitcoin was like $16,000. Here we are in our fourth podcast?
Yeah.
Bro, $77,000. So I want you to think about something. You can't argue with Uncle Jack anymore. I know you want but do you understand? And I'm going to tell you, I need both of you savages to hear this right now. I need you to get in your friend's mindset and your mindset that 77,000 today is just like 16,000 was before. Why? Because 1 year from today, I'm going to tell you, Bitcoin is probably going to be 150, 200, 300,000.
Okay. So what you say is that regardless of Bitcoin skyrocketing every day and getting higher and higher, there's no reason not to keep buying. Like,
no, you got to keep buying
money into Bitcoin.
Yeah, you got to keep buying. And the way your tax policy is over there, you buy it, hold it, you don't pay tax on it. If they ever decide to do like unrealized capital gains on you guys to try to steal your money, that's when I think I would then recommend to you guys, okay, it's time for you to come to El Salvador. It's time for you to go to UAE. It's time for you to go to Singapore. You need to do something to protect yourself. But do I think the chance of that happening to either one of you as young men is even realistic anymore? No. I think now the die is cast. That now that the United States has got on board with the sailor put, bro, it's only a matter of time, but everybody in Europe is going to get this. What I'm trying to tell you two, since you're my two European guys, you're the first two. I need you to go and start teaching the masses.
For sure.
Because this is going to change. This is going to change everything in Europe. I know. I mean, Matt, do you know how bad I had to get on his case about Bitcoin in Prague when we sat there? I said, you need to understand how it really works.
Yeah.
You don't change Bitcoin. Bitcoin changes you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's true. I mean, it's going to change many things, though. I mean, I think it's going to change.
Well, that makes me feel good you're saying that. You know why? Because you were a disbeliever when we started out. You're like, Jack, I don't understand how it could do. But you know what I like about this podcast we're doing? You actually now see the crack in the door and the light coming through. You're like,
yeah, I do. I mean, I definitely do.
That's a good thing. To me, that's what makes me happy. That means that's the reason why I come on and talk with you guys. That's the reason keep the message going, because what do I know that you two will do? When you're sitting down and having coffee or having a beer with your friends, you're going to say, hey, look, think about this. Watch this. You can take clips of this and make little clips and put it on your social media. Mads can put it on his Instagram and say, think about what Jack is saying here. This could have huge implications for all of our families. And the thing is, no, you don't have to go out and riot in the streets or throw manure on the king's castle. All you have to do is
buy Bitcoin.
Buy Bitcoin. Dude, it's like you're telling the government you can do whatever you want, but we're going a different way. We're going to go the way that Trump is now leading the tribe in the United States. And eventually we know that you're going to come in because he's going to make it so you have to come in. You're not going to have to. But you realize that as American money gets stronger and stronger and stronger, European money is going to get worse and worse and worse. So guess what?
What about
saying central banks are going to have to do? The same fucking thing Trump's doing. Otherwise, your money's not going to be worth anything. That is crystal clear. That's going to happen. You may lie to your and say it's not, but remember I told you the last two podcasts we do. It's okay for you to lie to your new wife. It's okay to lie to your mom and dad. It's not okay to lie to yourself. Okay? Never, ever make that mistake. But when Trump fixes the money in the United States, that means he's fixing the money everywhere in the world, whether you like it or not. So the sooner you guys get that message, then you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to buy Bitcoin. And then
For
you
sure,
just
for sure.
use your regular money to pay your bills and you're good to go.
But what will it do? What do you think it would do to stuff like borders and taxes and stuff like that? Isn't that going to be like, for
Wide
me, I
open.
can't even fathom how that's going to look like in 10 years.
Hey, listen to what I said to you. The biggest shock, and this was not anywhere on the campaign trail. When I came to you guys in Europe last time,
Mm-hmm.
if I would have told you this, it would have been okay for you guys to shoot arrows at me.
Mm-hmm.
Trump has said he's thinking about getting rid of the income tax. So let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Imagine if you never had to pay any income tax ever again
Perfect.
in your life. I want you to think about that for a minute. So I can tell you what it means to me. That means that I would get a free house every year. Do you think that would improve my life?
Yeah.
Hell,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know what kind of economic prosperity that brings? Trump is dead serious about this. So
Yeah.
if you have more economic power, that means you have more personal sovereignty. So what does it mean? Like I want
Mm-hmm.
to make the diagnosis like I try to do with Danny. This means that borders in EU is gone. That means, you're going to be able to move freely. You're going to have huge economic power. Prosperity is going to come up. This is so anti-European. It blows your mind when you see it. Okay? But you need to realize the only thing that you need to follow is the model that Michael Saylor built that now Trump is going to copy. And then you guys do it, because if you're the first ones in, do you realize how much more powerful you're going to be? Like Mads is going to be able to go to some of his friends that thought he was crazy and they're going to sell him a house and he's going to buy that house for a lot less than it cost them. And they're not going to make sense of it. They're going to say, well, I want fiat money. And Mads going to say, you can have all the fiat money you want.
Mm-hmm.
But then
Yeah.
Mads turn around to his friend and say, by the way, you'll never buy this house back because you don't really understand what's really happening. And then when people see
Mm-hmm.
the way you guys do things and they see your economic power getting greater and like, wait a minute, Mads is only a trainer. How the fuck is he making all this money? How is he doing this? Like now he wants to be a politician. Now he wants to go and change the world. People are going to start going, can you explain this to us? And guess
Yeah.
what? That's when you guys are going to you're going to begin to see the things that Uncle Jack saw in 2013. Why did I do this? Why did I creatively destroy my own neurosurgery job that was making me $3-4 million a year? Why did I take the medicine? Why did I reduce my salary by a tremendous amount to do the things that I'm doing to teach people about health? Because I started
Mm-hmm.
YOLO in Bitcoin. It turned out that was a better decision because I made more money in Bitcoin than I did doing neurosurgery. And it's very counterintuitive. But guess what? The thing is, you guys have spent a lot of time with me and we sat on that curb in Europe. And what did I tell you? I'm a diagnostician. I take problems, put them together, figure out a solution. That solution that I tried to tell you was crazy to most people. But guess what? It's worked. So you have to say to yourself as a young man, what is it about what Jack did in 2013 to 2024 that maybe I can recapitulate? Because guess what? Everybody's seeing what Michael Saylor did. Remember, what did Michael Saylor fundamentally do? In 2020, he doesn't even go back to 2013. His company, MicroStrategy in the United States, is worth $600 million. Today, it's worth $33 billion in
Mm-hmm.
4 years, bro. And
Yeah.
what
Bitcoin.
single change did he make? Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand what Michael Saylor's telling the world? Follow my lead. Guess what's happening now? The politicians in the United States go, hold my beer. I'm going to do the same thing. What am I telling you guys? The first two Europeans, bro, how many times you got to be hit in the head before you wake up?
Yeah.
It's not, it's not that hard
Oh,
to
you're
get
definitely right.
when you see it. And
Yeah.
when you see it, the acronym or the cliche that we always talk about in Bitcoin, you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. So Mads is going to tell his friend, yeah, I got in 2020. You're going to get in 2026. Yeah, it's going to cost you more. But if you understand Bitcoin, it's going to be worth millions of dollars a coin. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm 10 years from now, when you guys start having 3 or 4 babies, like Mads is going to have probably so many babies because he's going to have so much money.
Mhm.
He may have to get another baby mama to have more babies. That's what I'm trying to tell you, that it's that kind of effect
Yeah.
Yeah.
already does. And guess what? When those new babies come in, Mads is not going to have to put them, in a place where they get irradiated all day. He's going to say, you know what? I'm going to hire personal teachers. They're going to come and they're going to teach my children about the world. You're going to have the ability to do that, guys. And I know you don't see what I see yet, but I promise you, that's what's going on. That's what's
Yeah.
Yeah.
my life for 10 years. I mean,
Yeah.
I started doing this
Mhm.
before Michael Saylor. I started doing this before Trump. Why? Because I made a decision that I thought was right. And I knew that that decision sounded crazy to people who didn't understand it. It was like, I can imagine how the people in Noah's Ark time thought he was crazy to build this big boat when it's beautiful, sunny out. But guess what? When the water was up to their knees, maybe they didn't think he was so stupid anymore.
Mm.
Mhm.
That's the way I
Kind of
need
what's
you
happening
guys to
now.
think about it, right? Well, that's
Yeah.
happening to you guys. Like right now, the water was up to our knees in the United States. Now, with this election, it's down to our ankles.
Yeah.
Now we know that our boat is good, and Trump is trying to affect both things. He's trying to affect not only having a strengthening boat, but he's also trying to reduce the water that's falling around us.
Mm.
That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing.
I read something about Bobby was trying to fix the what's it called, the chemtrails and the fluoride and the non-native EMFs and blue lights and all that stuff. Can you put a few words on what he will do health-wise for the US?
I think the number one thing that he's going to do is he's going to go in and gut the FDA. He's probably going to go in and gut the CDC. It's not going to be what most Europeans think. I don't think he's going to make vaccines eradicated. I think what he's going to do, he's going to decrease the schedule in the United States for vaccines so it'll be more reasonable.
Mhm.
And I think the other thing is he's going to take the financialization of science out. So in other words, one of the big problems in the vaccine program, you guys heard in the Danny Jones podcast, how it basically is a bioweapon terrorist kind of
Mhm.
that came with the polio vaccines. So we need to change two laws. The two laws in the United States that are a problem. First one is the 1986 Act that protects Big Pharma from being sued. That needs to go. If you're going to make bad products that hurt people, then you need to be punished. I do think that Bobby's going to go after that one. Then I think the big one, this one may be harder to change, but it's called the Bayh-Dole Act, and it was made in 1982 through 84, and that's when U.S. scientists were given the ability to benefit or profit off science they did, even though the taxpayer paid for it. That's how we got Anthony Fauci. That needs to really change. Why? Because anything that the taxpayer pays for, that should be open source for everybody to benefit from. It shouldn't be for Fauci to benefit for. And we know through the messenger RNA jabs that Fauci made close to $440 million from doing this. And he used that money to weaponize science against us. This is the reason why we had all the misinformation come out in many of the journals, the peer review journals. And that's the part that I want to fix. The part that I want to fix is I think Bobby guts the FDA that way. I want to gut it from outside. See, if you take peer review outside of science and make it so that only the best scientists can do their science and get it published really fast and it can be open source, you take all the oracle problem of the journal editors away. And that is how I see things change. For example, if people think geoengineering is like tinfoil conspiracy, it can't be tinfoil conspiracy when there's patents in the United States on geoengineering. So once people in Europe realize that we are doing this by design and it's tied to the vaccine story because it makes people more compliant, then people will begin to understand how these two things are linked. And then what do? If we have good peer review science, then we do papers on what the effect of geoengineering is on plants, on bacteria, on soil chemistry. And all of a sudden, when you find out it's a bad idea, then you get rid of it. That's how you change the way science happens. And I think that's why the corruption, the way centralization has been ruined, You have to systemically take it apart by going to the root cause, like the cornerstone foundation. And Bobby he knows what he needs to do in the bureaucracy, but I know what needs to happen outside in the private sector to fix science. And most people don't even realize that the peer review system technically is outside of science. It sits in academia. Academia, remember the story that I told you in Danny Jones, because I don't think a lot of Europeans know where ARPANET, DARPA, and the internet came from. It's a government thing where they linked all these different universities together. And who were the people in these universities? These were all people that were loyal to Trotsky. These were all the people that came over in Operation Paperclip. These were all the Russian Jewish scientists that have been deployed everywhere in academia, and people have gone on. And this is, I try to make this point to Danny, but he didn't want to go there. Who is Dr. Fauci's number one liaison in the National Institutes of Drug Abuse? Nora Volkow. I've talked to people about Nora Volkow because she's the person that first found out that non-native EMF raised blood glucose and insulin irrespective of food. But do you know who she is?
Nope.
She's Trotsky's granddaughter. And guess who told me that? That was Robert O. Becker in 2007 when I went to meet him. He goes, be very careful. And it turns out that Nora and Fauci were working together. So Nora still sits in her chair. But what have I done this year? I've kind of showed everybody that even today, we still have a link back to Trotsky. We still have a link back to the people that ruined the system. And people are stunned when they hear this. And you need to realize that she controls many of the science linked to drug pathology. Well, you guys know all the things that I teach on science about POMC. POMC releases menencephalin, beta endorphin. The story that I laid out in some of the podcasts that you may not have heard, like the Adrian D'Amico podcast, where I talk to the people in Canada, UK, and Australia, because that's the UK people. The tentacle there is the Iran-Contra affair that started in the 1980s, where the United States basically linked Central and South America drug cartels to places in the United States. We created our own drug war. Why did we do it? The idea came right out of MK Ultra. Yeah. Then it was about mescaline, peyote, and LSD. Now we use fentanyl to do it. And we're paying Mexicans to drug addict Americans so that in cities, they will continue to vote blue and not red. That's what Elon Musk's story was about. And people don't realize when you put towers around people and then you geoengineer them, you make it more likely they're more compliant. That's exactly what the goal is.
So you say that if you put this US map and you point in all the NNEMF cell towers, they would actually resemble that map that Elon Musk put up on X.
Exactly.
Wow.
Just so you know, support for the blue, for the DNC, only comes from big cities, big population centers. The rest of the United States is red. So guess what? People don't realize when they look at that map, you're looking at a map of MK Ultra. And, MK Ultra went from right after the war. What did the name change to after? That became SRI, which is Stanford Research Institute. What did I just tell you about DARPA, ARPA, and the internet? Stanford, Johns Hopkins, and Harvard are those colleges where all these people who are bad academics linked to all these bad ideas that do the peer review, they're all linked together. This is exactly how DARPA operates. This is how General Gross set this whole program up. And when you see it for what it is for the first time, like I was hoping when I did the Danny Jones podcast, he was going to let me really get into this. But I wound up having to do it on several different podcasts because he couldn't fathom how Israel was tied to this, how Trotsky and the Trotskyites, the Russian Jews, were tied to it. Now, when the stuff that he did want to talk about is the stuff that doesn't interest me at all, which is Murder Inc. How did the FBI, CIA, and the mob, the Jewish mob and the Italian mob, get involved in this? Meyer Lansky was the reason why. He was the banker for Murder Inc. It turns out Meyer Lansky found out that the Rothschilds, what they did at the transfer agreement, pissed him off. Okay, totally pissed him off. And this was recapitulated when they caught the German SS guy that I told you about, his name was Kurt Plautner. Kurt Plautner was an SS surgeon. How did they find him? In the beginning of the Manhattan Project, you know why it was called Manhattan? Because it was buried in the 67th floor of the Empire State Building. That's where it started. Most people don't know that. And General Kruse and the military was worried that there was U-boats coming into New York Harbor, letting spies out so they could try to find out why they were taking all these Jewish guys in Operation Paperclip. They couldn't figure out what was going on. So General Kruse comes up with the idea to FDR. He says, well, who controls the docks in New York Harbor? It's the mob, through the long enormous. He goes, let's go sit down with the mob and see if they'll help us out being patriots, because if we lose, they lose too. That was the irony. And at that time in the war, things were not going great for the United States because of what happened at Pearl Harbor. So we were thin. We needed more help. So the U.S. military goes to Meyer Lansky and says to him, will you patrol the harbors in New York? And if any German U-boats come and let spies out, will you capture them? And Meyer Lansky turns around to them and says, yeah, if you want my help, no problem, but you got to do me a favor. Lucky Luciano, that works for the Italian mob, is in a maximum security prison right now. He goes, you put him in a minimum security prison so we can run our business and we'll help you out. So they make a deal with the devil, okay? They do it, and what happens? Literally the first month, they start capturing all these German spies. Who's one of these spies? Dr. Kurt Plautner. And Plautner's the one that tells them what they're doing to the Jews. Plautner actually tells Lansky that the UK government is tied to this whole thing. Like, this is a big fucking scam. So what does Lansky do? Not only does he turn over Plautner to the United States government, but he goes and tells pre-Mossad, the Zionists, the Rothschilds, and the bank. Lansky becomes a mortal enemy that day immediately for the Rothschilds. And remember, the Mossad is tied to the Rothschilds. So this gets to be very interesting. It turns out that Meyer Lansky, for his whole entire life, sets up a shadow banking institute that runs Murder Inc. from literally 1920 all the way until he dies in 1983. And they never were able to figure out what he did. He was working against the interests of the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers because he knew that they set the Holocaust up with the popes and the royal family.
Yeah.
Guess what? Who else knew that? Kruse. So what did Kruse do? When Kruse was forced out of the U.S. military, who did he look for help to set up his own financing? Meyer Lansky. How do you like that? That's how we get the mob involved. Politics that's going to happen in the 60s when they help kill JFK, because JFK wasn't good for business for Israel, and he wasn't good for business for General Kruse and his clowns that were running the industrial military complex. And
how do you know all these things, Jack?
Oh, yeah. Well, bro, trust me, I've been doing a lot of homework. The main reason I know this stuff is if you listen carefully to what I said in the Danny Jones podcast, I told you that I sat down with Becker before he died, a year before he died.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, he got canceled in 77.
Yeah.
This was now 30 years. He had 30 years to figure out who in the military screwed him over and ruined his lap because he brought the story to non-native EMF. It's all the guys that are in the story that's killed JFK. Exactly the same guys. Yeah. He made the accurate diagnosis. He's the one in 2006, 2007 that told me about Nora Volkow. I did not know that until he told me. He goes, be very careful. And he told me, if you tell this story, he goes, they're going to come after you. He goes, just like they came after me. He said the key thing to me that I never forgot, and this is why I never talked about this until literally this last year, when he went on the news on 60 Minutes in 1977 to tell the world that EMF is dangerous, nobody had a microwave, nobody had a cell phone. So nobody really cared. Nobody understood the magnitude of what he was saying. And when the military found out that he was a loose cannon, they basically shut him up. They canceled him. He's the second canceled doctor. First canceled doctor is Bernice Eddy, who was canceled because of the SV40 and the polio vaccine in the 50s. That's also tied to this story. You almost can't make this stuff up. And when they cancel him, he says to me, he says, just make sure if you're going to continue on my work and do this, that when you talk about this implication, you do it at the right time. So I made a determination when Trump decided to run for a second term, this was probably the best chance that I would ever have in my life to make a difference in the election in the United States. And then all of you started to see that my message basically didn't turn. It was still about non-native EMF. You remember when I flew over to Portugal and I told the story about the polio thing and the non-native EMF and how things were changing in El Salvador. I got sent over there to do that. And then all the things that I talked about with Rick when I started teaching Huberman about POMC, I wanted to find out, was Huberman more linked to SRI, which is the second generation of MK Ultra? Turns out he is. Now you know he is. Now it's no issue. This even surprised Rick. Remember, this is his friend. Then I never anticipated I was going to have a defector from the SRI people, which is Nicole Shanahan, who's Bobby Kennedy's vice president. She's afflicted by all this. She's married to one of the guys in the industrial military complex, Sergey Brin. So guess what? It's like all of this falls in my lap, and I'm like, this is the time to talk about it.
Yeah, that's how you know.
Like, this was not only thing I made a determination. I said, it's now time to put this out there. And I think where the spear of the needle really was, I don't think any of you guys realized how the non-native EMF story tied to MK Ultra, tied to SRI, and now the name is changed in SRI. Now it's the Brain Health Initiative. And I did, release that to Danny. I said, you guys need to understand that these programs have not changed. They are still doing them. And then here we are yesterday, Elon Musk puts that picture up of the map and he uses the red and blue. And what did I say? I said, no, Elon, the joke's on you. You don't even realize he's being groomed. He's being groomed by the same people.
You, Jack, do you have any? I mean, I like Elon Musk. The way he is, you can see that he's a good guy. But I think that he lacks a lot of the knowledge that you have when he creates his technology. Do you have a foot in the door? Somehow you can talk to a guy like that and have him incorporate something. Bobby Kennedy, something.
My only foot in the door was probably with Jack Dorsey. And fortunately, Jack Dorsey had to sell Twitter. And you guys may not know this. I haven't said this publicly on a podcast, but I will tell the story now. I knew that Jack Dorsey was going to sell Twitter way before anybody else. Why? Because we had a Bitcoin meeting that he showed up with my members and he told us it was going to happen. Part of the story that many people may not know, but I guarantee you that you two and many of your European friends are going to go rent a movie. The movie is the last Jason Bourne movie that was released in 2016. That movie was made by Hollywood and the people in Hollywood that work with the industrial military complex as a warning to Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg that if you fuck with us, we will kill you.
What was it called?
Jason Bourne, the last movie in 2016.
Okay.
The latest one they did. And guess what? That message was heeded by Jack, and that's why Jack said, it's time for me to get out. Like, I can't play this game anymore. Zuckerberg is still playing the game, but you heard what Zuckerberg just said about Facebook. He goes, yeah, the government asked me to censor, but I was kind of against it, but, it's his mea culpa.
Yeah.
Guess what? If he didn't do what they told him to do, this was their best chance to get communism in the United States. This was their best chance to get the UN Charter to replace our Constitution. This was the best chance to get Klaus Schwab's plan in the United States. It failed. That's the reason why they were so against Trump. And the problem is, you guys as Europeans haven't seen all these big things. And could I say all the things that I knew earlier? No, it wasn't the right time. This 2024 was the time to tell you all this and realize that many people look at Jack Dorsey and they think, oh, well, he's a communist. How can he be a communist when his company Block only does Bitcoin? They don't do any shit coins. He's not interested in doing anything else. And what he keeps doing, he goes to Africa. He goes to all the places where nobody has Bitcoin. And he tries to get them on the Bitcoin standard. Why? Because he knows what I told you in the beginning. You know what he said to me at the Miami 2021 meeting? I said to him, Jack, what do I need to do for you? And he goes, Jack, just keep doing what you're doing. Decentralize the world. Keep telling people the truth. And bro, that's what I've been doing. I've been doing that consistently.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I want you guys to know that some of the guys that you thought were bad guys in this game, they weren't. Jack Dorsey was like Sergey Brin at one time. But guess what? The technology got him sick. And that's when he sought me out. And when he sought me out, that's what happened. He's no longer an MK Ultra guy. He's no longer an SRI guy. He's no longer a Brain Health Initiative guy. But guess who still is? Sergey Brin, all of his friends, and Mark Zuckerberg. And if you don't believe it, the psychiatrists that take care of all these people, they're all still linked. They're still taking care of their kids. All of them. Every single big tech executive links back to the SRI problem that still exists in the United States. Stanford University is one of the biggest offenders of MK Ultra in the world. And that's the reason why they're so linked to big tech. This is why I try to make the links for you guys between Sergey Brin and the Wojcicki sisters. Remember, Sergey Brin and the Wojcicki sisters, these are Russian Jews. You don't realize this is the Mossad that you don't know that are in the United States. They're all in big tech.
Fucking hell.
When you really realize what's happening is that many of the sequences that are found in the vaccine bioweapons were harvested from 23andMe data. And
Really?
what happened? Oh, yes. When you realize kind of what the game is, you had people in the government, outside with the industrial military partners. You guys may not know this because I don't think this news made probably hit Europe. You know that in the last 6 weeks that the board of 23andMe walked out on the Wojcicki sister that controls this because she wanted to sell the data and weaponize it to the government. The whole board got up and walked out. So now 23andMe may go bankrupt. I'm sure Sergey Brin and all of his friends will save it because remember, that used to be Sergey Brin's ex-wife.
Yeah.
That was his wife before Nicole Shanahan. So he was involved in data harvesting and those things and using the Internet of Things to control people by wideband technology. We have two people that are working right now with Bobby Kennedy that I'm concerned about, Casey and Callie Means. Why? They trained under the 23andMe people. They trained under Sergey Brin. That's the reason why she left her residency early. Why? Because she's now able to use this technology because this is now MK Ultra 5.0, where they can use big technology. This is the whole idea of the trans movement. Who do you have to worry about with this? I don't think really Elon Musk knows what the plan is with Neuralink. It's definitely not his plan, but is it the plan of Peter Thiel? Is it the plan of the industrial military players? Yeah. And do I believe that will be stolen? And what's the trade-off? The trade-off is the government says to Elon, we'll let you be Rocket Man. We'll support you, but you're going to help us control the people. So the next control, my friend, isn't going to be the map that Elon showed. That's why we have Space Force. Okay? Space Force.
And the fucking what's
got
that called? You're
starting to see where the plan is, my friend. So I know you're a fan of Elon Musk. You're allowed to be a fan of him. Just like I told you, I'm a fan of Bukele. I'm a fan of Bukele until I'm not a fan of Bukele. When he starts to do things nefarious to people, that's when I stop supporting him. Elon Musk, for me, he hasn't done anything yet to harm the people. But do I understand the risk of his technology? I do. I need you to understand. So
for sure. But that's
when you become rich on Bitcoin, you have to promise me, don't buy a Tesla and don't do Neuralink.
That's why I want you to talk to him, because that's the only way I can trust that shit won't happen, because you're the only person I've heard talk about these things, about blue light and how it creates cancer. And once you really, the more you hear about it, the more it makes sense. I heard the other podcast on Danny Jones with what was her name? Alexis?
Alexis Cohen.
Yeah.
Oh, and she also explains it so well as well. And once you hear both of you guys, you're like, the fucking Trump and all these people, they need to know this, and they need to, make the rules and make the whatever around this.
I got news for you. Trump knows this. Remember, he was the president of the United States the one time already. So he knows a lot of the stuff going on. The problem is, once you know what's really going on, you start to realize, well, shit, I got a big problem. So you have to realize Elon Musk has a choice. His choice right now is, do I keep playing ball with the PayPal mafia guy, the industrial military complex, or do I join on board and try to do the right thing? So guess what I'm looking to see what Elon chooses the next, 15, 20, 30 years. But you remember, one thing that I have a big problem with Elon Musk is that he's been a friend of Bitcoin. He's one of the guys that owned it, but then what did he do? He started talking shit about and started talking about shit coins like Dogecoin. We can't have that from him. That is bullshit. And now that Trump is clearly signaling we're going to a Bitcoin standard and we're going to have a reserve asset, I want to see how Musk changes. Like, one of the big things that Musk did do, and I have to give him credit, the number one thing that has put a lot of my respect for Musk is that he made Twitter the town square again for the United States. Like, the people who are disaffected were able to say whatever they wanted on Twitter for the last year and a half. Everybody in America owes, I'm going to tell you, everybody in the world owes a debt of gratitude from Musk for that reason. Now, I'm going to tell you guys in Europe, this is why I've told you this. I think that you guys need to do way more on Twitter because of this, so that you understand that this is where you won't be, deplatformed. Like YouTube, Instagram, like where you guys are, bro, you got to be careful because you're playing with the fucking devil there. And if you say stuff that they don't like, they're going to turn your shit off. So, like, you guys getting on Rumble, you guys getting on X, these are the platforms that savages need to start to populate. And I need you to understand why. I think Elon Musk probably did more to save the First Amendment in the United States than anybody else. I'm actually going to say something that may shock people. I think Elon Musk won the election more for Trump than just about anybody else, because that people could speak their mind and people started to realize what was going on. And I want you to remember something. The Supreme Court judges in Brazil that tried to put Musk out of business there, or the EU that's trying to put, Musk out of business in Europe, you Europeans, you need to fucking fight for X, bro. I'm not kidding you, because X is a change agent for the fucking criminals in Europe. You need to understand the same thing that we used X for in the United States, you guys need to use it for as well.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
I do think that you guys need to put content, and you need to come on X, and hopefully what you do is, like, you chop our little video up and you put it on X and tweet it at Elon Musk, tweet it at those people, because I think when people see this and more people in Europe see this, then you guys will understand that as long as we're working for personal sovereignty and freedom, we as savages, we can support you. When you step out of bounds, then we're going to slap the shit out of you. That's fair game, bro. That's the way it's supposed to work. And I support Musk and what he's doing right now with SpaceX. And, I don't support the electric car stuff. I think that's bullshit. And I don't think Neuralink is a good idea. I think Neuralink is exactly evolution 7.0 of MK Ultra. I think it's going to be used by the federal government in really bad ways, and I think they're going to be able to control you from satellites above. You won't even know about the satellites around you anymore. In fact, any border you go on the tectonic plates, you will be able to be controlled. That is what I have a major, major problem with.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you there. Also, I'm not a huge fan of him. I think what he's doing on a fundamental level is good, but like you say, with the Neuralink, for example, it doesn't fit into
I would tell you, look at Callie and Casey Means. I don't know if they've resonated in Europe yet, because they're two food gurus, but they've like had a meteoric rise in the United States. And I waited very carefully to put a harpoon in them. Why? Because I don't want them to be part of the transition team for Trump. Why? Because I look at these two as agents for Sergey Brin and the Wojcicki sisters. They're the people that are going to push wideband technology. Why? They both own a transhumanist medical company. In fact, if you read the book, Mads, you'll be shocked. Her book, when she talks about sleep, she says the single best sleep hack is to wear a Fitbit. I want you to think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
So this tells you right away that she doesn't understand non-native EMF, but you have to realize she wants to use a wideband area network. She's using the Internet of Things tied to the human body. That's exactly what Neuralink is. So you have to realize that she's part of our problem. Like, she is the warning shot. Her brother is the warning shot. And if they get involved in the transition team for Trump, I'm worried about that. Like,
But then
they're the soldiers that could be weaponized by Neuralink. And right now it's only starting out with Fitbits and continuous glucose monitoring. But the Oura Ring, I'm against all of that. Now you know the reason why I'm against it. Why? Because all of those technologies are looking to potentially harm us by putting technology inside of us. We need
for
to
sure.
look at that.
But then what's the balance? Because I mean, think about it. We're about to get Bitcoin. We're about to get blockchain, which is a technology in itself. Once you put blockchain in Fitbits, they become super efficient, 100 times more efficient, because all of a sudden you have an ecosystem of technology talking together like it's nature.
Right.
So, I mean, you're going to have something that's a
What
lot
you
more
said.
powerful.
Think
Huh?
about what you said. You just proved my
Yeah.
point. It's technology like nature, but it's not. And that's
Yeah,
the
but that's
But you
true.
made
But if it's blue light,
you made the mistake that they want you to make. They want you to think that technology can somehow supersede nature. Dude, let me just tell you something. The
Mhm.
atomic molecular organization inside your cells will never be improved by
I
man.
know.
It won't.
I'm just talking about what's the balance, because we're already talking about we got to get on X and we got to do Bitcoin. That's a part of that. How to
You're the
say?
balance.
That's a part of.
You're the balance. Your sovereignty. That's what you don't understand, why Bitcoin is such a huge part of this. Because guess what? When you really become self-sovereign, you can opt out of the system that they're building, the transhumanist system. And the thing is, when you guys do Instagram posts and you talk about Aura rings, you talk about this and that, and you hear how vehement that I come out against stuff like that, I think now both of you are going to have a new way of looking at it. Like, for example, something that we did talk about the last two podcasts, when you asked me about supplements, I can make it so simple now that all the other podcasts have come out. Why am I so against supplements? Very simple. Does Intel or AMD, and AMD is very close to your neck of the woods, in the Netherlands. Do you think it makes sense to put different kinds of atoms inside a semiconductor fabrication plant? Of course not. That's exactly what you do when you take supplements. You're actually putting different atoms in your body that the cells don't need. They don't use that stuff. And when you actually think about it like that, you're like, yeah, I mean, potentially, are we using things like drugs? Like Mads brought it up before, that Bobby Kennedy's going after fluoride. Yeah, fluoride's a dielectric blocker for water. We know that water in the semiconductor design of a cell is actually one part of the semiconductor. The other part is the proteins that have a collagen backbone. And our semiconductors need water and carbon to work together. The ones that Elon Musk is using, the one that big tech is using is fucking silicon based, and water destroys it. So they're not even close to where we are. But when you add something like fluoride and it destroys the dielectric constant of water, that means that you ruin energy at a fundamental level in your cell. The same thing is true when you take things like NAD supplements from David Sinclair. But he sold you a line of bullshit through marketing, which is propaganda. You're like, oh, well, this is a great thing. Or this is the big idea that the functional guys do. Oh, well, Mads had you do your bloods, and your bloods show that you're low in magnesium. So, okay, we're going to replace it with magnesium. No, you fucking go eat some oysters. That's what you do.
Exactly. Yeah,
Because that's exactly where you want to get it from. Because guess what? That's how nature was built to work. Your semiconductor fabrication plant is spectacular if you get out of the way.
Mm.
Mhm.
I'm also like,
Transhumanists want you to believe The opposite.
Yeah.
They want you to believe in human engineering.
Yeah.
Wrong answer.
Yeah, it becomes very
Yeah.
Brian Johnson like when you do this blood test. Oh, you need this and this and this and this. So instead of just feeding you the right diet, we just give you 90 different supplements to cover these things. It's obvious that that's not the way nature created it.
It's centralized shitcoinery. That's exactly what functional medicine and allopathic medicine is. And, you know, when I say that to you guys laugh. But I think now, after we've talked 3 or 4 times and we spent a lot of time together, I think you guys really understand now where I'm coming from. Because now what I've done in this last year, I've given you now the 100,000-foot view of really how Jack sees all these things interplaying. Like, you're beginning to see big parts, how it all fits together. And you go, so this is why, like, the dermatologist, the ophthalmologist, and Bill Gates have something in common. They all want to block the sun. Because if you block the sun, block how our semiconductor plants work in us. That's fundamentally the message that came out of MKO.
Yeah. It's still crazy to me that it's how to say, it's intentional, that there's actually some people that are intentionally trying to do this. That I still have a hard time understanding that. I believe it's true, but
Let me ask you this question. And I don't mean to presuppose that you know this. You know how, like, on podcasts, I always came off really pissed off. Do you understand why I was pissed off now that I had to hold all this in for 30 years? So let me ask you this question as a European.
Mhm.
Now that you know that the royal family, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, propped up Hitler, created the biggest bullshit story ever, where everybody in Europe thinks that Hitler was the bad guy, but you never realize who really the bad guys were. The biggest propaganda story in the history of the 20th century. Do you know that more things have happened in Europe because of that bullshit story? And realize what they did. The people, the architects behind this, because they wanted a state in Palestine for their people, were willing to sacrifice their own people to it. That is
I mean,
fucking
I
how
get it.
evil they are. So you
Yeah,
don't think
I get
that
it. I
they're
mean, I
okay
also
killing millions of people with COVID jab?
yeah,
Bro, you missed the plot.
yeah,
That is
yeah. I
what
know. I
the
get it. I
message
get
that
it.
I want to
It's
get the savages out with, bro. I mean, a lot of you guys, I know that most of you don't even know the book, The Transfer Agreement. It was written by a Jew, not a Zionist, a Jew. His own family disowned him until they actually read it and went back and looked at it. They couldn't believe their own people did this to themselves just to get entry in the
yeah,
Mediterranean. And when you see it, then you go to these museums like the Eli Wiesel Museum in New York, and you go, bro, this is all a fucking government psyops. And when you
yeah,
realize behind it, you go, how that it should
yeah,
make you realize why Edward Bernays wrote the book in 1921, Propaganda. Dude, and who's Bernays married to? Sigmund Freud's people. Who are the people
yeah.
that are tied to Jolly West and all the MK Ultra stuff? It's fucking all of these
Yeah, but I mean, started all the way back with Napoleon, right? I mean,
same players.
yeah.
The Rothschilds started there. The Battle of
Mhm,
Waterloo is actually how the Rothschilds got control in 1812.
mhm,
But what I'm
mhm,
saying, stuff that you guys in Europe have been scarred by, is the stuff that went on in World War II. And when you find out that it's the side you were fighting on, use this as a psyop to try to get
mhm,
the United States and Russia back, and that however many people died, whether you believe it's just a couple of 100,000 or 4 million, that story has been used by that group of people in
yeah.
1948 country to fucking lie for the last literally 120 years. It's like
That's great.
totally fucked up the whole world. That's why when I tell you and you see this, people will sacrifice other people. Like, I know it's hard for you to believe, but you have lived in a world that's actively doing this. I look at, mind
Yeah,
you, as a doctor, Big Pharma sacrifices people every day by giving them drugs. This is the reason why I have a vehement problem with the functional medicine guys. Now you guys know why I hate big tech.
Mhm.
They're killing fucking people every day, and they know they're doing it. God damn it, even Steve Jobs wrote it in his autobiography, and he died from it. I mean, you guys
Yeah.
heard when I went to Prague. I told you before I got on stage, what story was I going to tell people? The story of Steve Jobs, Paul Allen, and Hal Finney. How 3 technologists, billionaires, all chose greed over their own time. You can't do that. And I'm telling you, this story, bro, this story is a story of us. It should make you self-reflect, look in the mirror and go, how do I want to live my life? Do I want to live my
Yeah.
life telling people the truth or not? So when you guys go back and listen to some of my old podcasts and you see how fucking mad I was holding all this shit in, bro. I had
Yeah.
it in for 30 years. And let me tell you something.
Mhm.
I don't think anything has made me more fucking pissed off than this story. And now that the cat's out of the bag, everybody now understands my perspective.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
now I think you can judge me. Now I'm okay being judged.
Yeah. But
I look at it like this. You have to become the change you want to seek in the world. And the part that I can have an impact on, my little part, is if I can get people to put Windex on their glass eyes and they begin to see
mhm.
something they never saw before, then they begin to realize that there is nefarious forces all around us. And those nefarious forces have been hidden from us because of MK Ultra. Because if you're dumbed
Yeah,
down, you don't see all the things that we've talked about. And the
for sure.
more of the things that I get you guys to see, the more you realize maybe this isn't so crazy about Jack. And you remember the things I told both of you, even when we were off camera. I said, bro, don't trust anything I tell you. Verify it. Verify it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Verified. Yeah. But I
You
mean,
realize
that's the
that
thing.
Danny Jones had Alexis come on his show and say, look, is all the stuff that Jack told us about blue light, non-native EMF, is it true? And what did she do? She laid it all out. She goes, of
Laid it all
course.
out. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and that's
And
the kind of stuff, that you guys are doing too. You're doing it for the people in Europe, and that's why I want you to continue to do it. That's why I told Chantel, coming on and talking with you guys right after our election, I think it's important because I know people in Europe don't see this election probably the way that people in the United States do. And I think
Yeah.
that you guys will be able to open some of their eyes and go, bro, we just got the plan of how
Mm.
savages in Europe should begin to start acting. And
Yeah.
I'm going to tell both of you. I'm going to tell your friends. I'm going to tell your audience. Don't trust Uncle Jack. Verify it. But when you do, then you start telling everybody.
Mm.
That's how he changed the world, my friend.
Yeah. It really is. I really think that the reason we call this disclosure our podcast is also because we definitely think there's this coming right now. I believe this is what it is about. And I think that we've
Disclosing.
seen one of the things I think is so interesting is, um, for instance, the Epstein cases and the Diddy cases and all that shit is the same people that were supporting the left side or whatever, Kamala Harris. It's the same damn people
Yeah.
that's supporting them. And how can people not even see that?
Oh,
Like,
let me tell you guys this because I don't think you probably got this flavor from the US, but you probably did get it from the podcast if you listen. I really did a pretty good job with Adrian D'Amico on this. Meyer Lansky is the one that started the pedo rings. Meyer Lansky is what started the prostitution rings. He's the one that taught Epstein how to do this after he died. Why? Because what the people in the Mossad realized, if you could get politicians compromised, you can control them. So who did Meyer Lansky famously compromise in the United States? You guys may not know this, but it was J. Edgar Hoover, the guy
the president.
in the FBI. And he had pictures of him and homosexual behavior, and he used it to blackmail him pretty much the whole time so he could get away with the things he did. Well, when Epstein got arrested, many people in Europe may not know this, but above his mantle in the main living room is a picture of Clinton,
Mhm.
Monica Lewinsky's dress with red shoes on. The red
Yeah.
shoes tied to the papacy because that's what they do. That's the pedo rings. And the blue dress, obviously, you have the story of MK Ultra. That's also the dress that Monica Lewinsky wore when she got involved with Clinton, but Clinton's in there. And basically what Epstein was telling him, we've got tapes on you and your wife. Don't forget it. And then if you go in his bedroom, what did they find? A picture of George Bush, all red around him, making paper airplanes, throwing it into buildings. So they're telling you that Clinton was just like Hitler. It was a fucking shit show. It was a government psyops. And who was behind that? The Mossad trained 4 guys from Saudi Arabia to actually fly into the buildings. So the United States government, the industrial military complex, sacrificed 3,500 Americans in that building. Why? Why is this very important for you two to hear? What's my concern with this guy, Lutnick? Lutnick, Cantor Fitzgerald, most of the people, you don't know this, were based in the top of the World Trade Center. They all died. But Lutnick spectacularly got a message that he had to take his son to school that day. So he didn't die. The owner of Cantor Fitzgerald did die, though. So guess who takes over? Lutnick. Now he becomes a huge player in finance for the U.S. Treasury. Now he's going to be part of the Bitcoin thing. Do you understand why I have I'm a little bit concerned about this guy? And I know his links. I know his links. But he's saying, he's just like Elon Musk. He's saying and doing all the right things. Okay? But do I trust him? The answer is no. And now you know the reason why. Why? Because the story of American history since World War II is always a half truth. It's always like the food gurus are. They always tell you what you want to hear, but you need to go a little bit deeper. Why? Because you may find out that there's something nefarious going behind the scene that you haven't seen coming. And I really believe that when you have a good decentralized mind, and you get that from Ponzi, you know that we talked about why I wanted you to eat, seafood and meat in Prague is because you need those raw materials to be able to be a good thinker. Like when you said to me earlier, Jack, I just can't fathom that this stuff is really going on. I need you to fathom that, because guess what? That is what has been going on in the world probably for 1,000 years. These people in control, these global elites, they are not to be trusted at any level. And remember, when there's a lot of savages in Europe, in El Salvador, in the United States, we become more difficult for their plans to unfold. Don't forget that. That's the reason that I have planned my attack for 30 years, because of that little visit that I had with Becker. If I don't have that visit, then the Jack Kruse that you guys know, who's ornery and pissed off, you don't really understand why I've been doing what I've been doing and the reason I've been doing it. Now I have a different viewpoint. You're like, wow, maybe he's not really as big an asshole as we thought.
We should go with this, with the plan.
Playing the same game that they're playing, except, I was worried that we were going to take the wrong step. If we went the Kamala step, the bad guys would have won. And right now, I'm still telling you, there's still some bad guys on the Trump side. We're not done yet. We may have won an election, but we're not done yet. I just told you who one of the guys that I'm worried about is. Pay attention to Lutnick. You guys start following him on Twitter. And trust me, if that guy steps off the beaten path, I'll be the first fucking guy up his ass. Promise you that. But Lutnick also has a chance to change his stripes. Like if he
I guess you gotta be fair. You gotta give him a chance.
Exactly. That's why I'm telling you. Look, I always believe in redemption. Okay. I believe that you can, fix things. Just like I told you, I liked you. The last podcast was really about you, is about you getting to realize some of the things that, you wouldn't die if you ate a piece of octopus or a piece of steak. The reason why is we need guys like you to really think really well. Why? Because you didn't believe the last time that simple little people could change the world. Bro, I told you about the guy that registered 150 Amish guys in Pennsylvania. Bro, one guy did. One guy. And he did it because of raw milk, dude. Like, that guy has ultimate respect for me. You know, you see what I'm saying? That is what a savage does. Like they don't worry about the whole thing. They just focus on what they're good at doing and they do it. And when we do podcasts together like we're doing now, I hope that you guys continue to add savages when you're training people. When you're in Sweden and he's in Denmark and he's doing the things that I see him do on Instagram. Just keep doing that because we will
for sure.
army of decentralized thinkers and we will create the world that we want. I promise you we will. I think when I'm dead, you guys got to pick the torch up. You already see I'm passing the torch to a person like Alexis. I didn't pass it to Huberman because Huberman told me that he was part of the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we need to create leaders. We need to create savages, like you say, and I think that you have made that clear for us. And I think really believe that we learn a lot from you every time we do these conversations. Like, last time you made me buy 1 Bitcoin. Let's see what the next thing is.
Now he's gonna make you buy one more. But yeah, I mean,
but guess what? That's the good thing about it. Now he's married. Maybe there's babies coming. You don't know. But here's the big thing. The more Bitcoin that he buys, the more sovereign he becomes. And, you know, he's already said, look what's going on with my daughter here. I want him to fix that problem, but I want him to understand how to fix it. The path is very simple. The path is different for you guys than it is for me, not only because we're different ages, but also because of where we live. Like regulations for us are going to change. Like I'll give you an example of just how big a deal this is. If Trump really changes and gets rid of the income tax immediately, you know what I do? I go and cash out all my retirement. I don't pay any tax. You know what I do with all that? Immediately,
Bitcoin.
probably buy Bitcoin. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because right now, when you own an IRA in Bitcoin, it's technically paper Bitcoin. Paper Bitcoin is not equivalent, you know, to regular Bitcoin. In fact, I put a Twitter feed out yesterday about Lutnick and about paper Bitcoin and actually how they're not equivalent, but they want you to believe they're equivalent. That's what Larry Fink wants you to believe with BlackRock.
Yeah.
That's what Lutnick is trying to tell you too. And guess what?
Yeah. Tell him to fuck off.
Right. Yeah. Well, now the best chance for you to understand this is like, okay, I got it. Remember, your allodial title is Bitcoin. You have no other options in your life for a allodial title than Bitcoin. That means the answer for both of you as savages, I need you both to get as much as you can get. Yeah. If you have to take money out to live, I'm okay with that. That's part of the reason why I told you guys that I'm a really big fan of San Salvador and El Salvador. Why? Because it's already legal tender here, so you can do both ways. Like guys, I have a lot of work going on in my house right now. I only work with people that take Bitcoin. If they don't take Bitcoin, I don't hire them. That's how crazy I don't want to support anybody who supports the fiat system. Yeah. Why? Because I'm trying to treat them as savages. And guess what? Several of the guys, like I have a guy that you guys will love. He lives in Metapan, which is like on the top of a volcano. It's like 8,000 feet high. And, you know, it's above the clouds. His name is Victor. He never knew anything about Bitcoin until I met him about 18 months ago. So at the end of the visit that we're up there, I tipped him $100, but I gave it to him in Bitcoin. I made him sign up for the Strike wallet. And he calls up the guy that works for me here. I don't know, like maybe like 6 weeks ago, he goes, bro, I have like $400 now. Like I told him he's not allowed to sell it. Now it's even more because when he called, I think Bitcoin at that time was like 53,000. Now it's even higher. And he's like, I can't believe this. I said, dude, never sell that because that's your Picasso. You will see that money continues to grow and grow and grow. And I told him, my belief is one day American politicians and American bankers will make you very rich for that $100. That's what I think is going to happen. And now here we are. Here we are at the precipice of this election. That actually may be coming in.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've been talking about these whole 1.5 years. Yeah.
Both of you guys, the same thing. You know, Mads, believe me. He's in.
I believe you too.
Yeah,
I believe you too.
You just have to prove it. Buy the
Fucking
Bitcoin.
hell.
So, yeah.
Every time.
Well, amazing, Jack. Thanks for the updates and thanks for blowing our minds again.
I
Good.
would
We
say like every time we speak, and especially after Prague, that was so fun. That was a good time actually.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was a lot of fun. I enjoyed
um,
spending that time with you guys, and I would tell
yeah.
you that maybe what we do is maybe we do another podcast after maybe the first 50 or 100 days of Trump
Yeah.
to see kind of what's happened. But
Oh yeah.
Chantal told me that Matthias Kucher, who runs Bitcoin Prague, he wants me to come back and speak again next year. So we'll
Perfect.
see. We'll see if Uncle Jack decides to do
You're
it.
coming then. Yeah, for
All
sure.
right.
We will do a part
yeah.
2, so Jacob can eat some more
Okay.
meat and
Oh yeah.
red wine.
All
Yeah.
right. Sounds good.
For sure. Thanks, Jack. All the
Take
best
care,
to you.
guys.
Thank you, Jack.
Let Chantal know
And
when
say hello to Chantel.
Yeah,
she's over here. She's sitting in the sun.
that's great. Say
Okay.
hello, Joe.
All right. No problem. Chantal, the boy, say hello. All right. She says
care.
hello
All right.
back.
Good.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
Good.
Up.
Enjoy.